The death penalty or capital punishment has been around for quite some time. It's often seen as the worst sentence after life imprisonment, which is reserved for inmates that have committed heinous crimes. In recent years, there's been a lot of debate over the effectiveness of capital punishment. Some believe that it serves as a good deterrent to crimes, while others claim it is barbaric and discriminates against minorities. No matter what side you're on, the idea of having death hanging over your head is one most of us can't imagine. In this video, join us as we take you through what it feels like to live a day in the life of a condemned inmate. Now, if you like these videos and want to see more, then make sure you leave us a like on the video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on post notifications to be the first to watch all our new and exciting videos. I will be replying to every comment on this video as well, so good luck. A day in the life of a death row convict begins early in the morning when breakfast is served. The cells are approximately 13 feet long, 7 feet wide, and 8 feet high, but they do vary in size. Inmates on death row are confined to their cells, and meals are always delivered to them. Only those assigned to less restrictive units eat in a dining hall with the other inmates. Visits to death row convicts are limited, and contact can only be made through a glass pane and over the phone. In the United States, a judge will give the jury the option of imposing a death sentence or life imprisonment without the possibility of release if a person is found guilty of a capital charge in a death penalty state. It's then up to the said jury to decide whether or not to impose the death penalty. This decision must usually be unanimous. If the jury decides on death, the defendant will remain on death row for the duration of the appeal and habeas corpus process, which may take several years. They know only isolation. Unlike regular inmates who may be confined in shared cells, those on death row are almost always left in maximum security units. Most death row cells are completely walled off, preventing convicts from seeing each other. Guards open a small gap in the thick cell door to allow inmates to receive meals and let sunlight into the room. This is a sort of special solitary confinement, and several inmates around the country are subjected to it for approximately 17 hours a day. Opponents of capital punishment argue that a prisoner's isolation and uncertainty about their fate is a form of psychological abuse that can have lasting effects on inmates. As a result, they are more likely to develop a mental disorder if they don't already have one, and this is known as the death penalty phenomenon. Estimates show that 5 to 10% of convicts on death row have mental illnesses. Some convicts may even attempt suicide before their execution. There have been some requests for a ban on the death sentence for mentally ill inmates, such as the case of Atkins versus Virginia. To this day, no legislation has been enacted to categorically ban the execution of people with mental illnesses. Death row inmates spend an average of 3 hours each day outside their cell to shower, exercise, undergo routine checks, and talk to the rare visitor. They're always handcuffed unless they're in their cell, showering, or exercising in the prison exercise facility. If an offender is lucky, a desk and chair will be crammed into their tiny room. Imagine having to live the rest of your life in a windowless cell about the size of your bathroom. Exercise is limited to 4 hours each week. Inmates are allowed to exercise for 4 hours a week on average to avoid muscle atrophy from inactivity. However, this may only happen twice a week, or in some special cases, it can get as high as 21 hours a week. The exercise area is highly secured and relatively tiny, and in some situations, it may be physically impossible for inmates to work out together. Although it's well known that daily exercise is beneficial for both physical and mental health, this right is frequently revoked. A single infringement could result in a death row inmate missing a week or more of gym time. Some offenders in maximum security never even get to physically interact with staff without the use of restraints, and they take recreation only one inmate at a time. Some are not even allowed to have contact visits. Death row syndrome. Death row syndrome is a mental health disease that affects those who have been sentenced to death. Many circumstances, including the dismal living conditions, contribute to this mentally damaging issue. Its causes include the appeal process, last-minute stays of execution, and the fact that inmates don't precisely know when they'll die. When you add in the lack of sunlight and social interaction, you have a recipe for disaster. Symptoms of death row syndrome include poor physical and mental health, self-destructive conduct, insanity, and agitation, among others. Some inmates have been on waiting lists for more than 2 decades to be executed. Some are excluded from prison education and employment programs, and they're severely limited in terms of visitation and exercise during this time, spending lots of time a day alone in their cells. Due to the jurisdiction's extensive and time-consuming appeal procedures, inmates in the United States may have to wait several years before being executed. Background statistics. The statistics on death row inmates in the US give us a better understanding of the type of people subjected to capital punishment. Caucasians make up 55.4% of the death row population, while African Americans make up about 42.3%, and people of other races make up 2.3%. Inmates of Hispanic Latino descent are classified as white, and Latin convicts account for 14.8% of those on death row. Men account for 98.2% of people on death row, whereas women take up only 1.8%. From 1977 to 2012, 8,406 people were sentenced to death in the United States alone. 55.7% of death row inmates have never married, 19.6% are divorced or separated, 21.1% are married, and 3.5% are widowed. Half of all death row inmates were between the ages of 20 and 29, 10.5% were 19 or younger, and 1% were 55 or older at the time of arrest. The average age of a death row inmate at the time of arrest is 29. This data comes from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, Capital Punishment, and it represents the population of people on death row as of December 31st, 2012, which is the last year that this data was publicly reported. Death before execution. You'd think that with all the precautions in place, death row inmates wouldn't have to worry about their safety in prison. Their daily time outside a cell, however, can still have fatal repercussions. According to statistics, 25% of prisoners on death row will die before their sentence is carried out. Natural causes, suicide, and being murdered by another death row inmate are the three main reasons. This possibility of unexpected death could make any detainee on death row waiting for their execution even more mentally traumatized. Inmates are counted twice an hour, which frequently disturbs their sleep. Each state has its own set of rules, but it's not uncommon for inmates to be checked once or twice an hour every day for the duration of their sentence. Anyone in isolation in California, including death row inmates, is checked 48 times a day. During these checks, the sounds of jingling keys and loud voices, along with quite bright lights, are often experienced. In other words, inmates are frequently denied the opportunity to sleep for more than 30 minutes at a time, resulting in severe sleep deprivation. On death row, the average prisoner spends at least 15 years before being executed. Can you fathom what it would be like to go 15 years without getting proper sleep? Everything is restricted, including the number of times inmates can shower. Something as mundane as taking a shower can become a luxury for those on death row. Depending on their maximum security unit assignment, inmates are allowed to shower at most 7 days each week, with a minimum of 3 days a week. To add insult to injury, sometimes there may not be enough hot water for baths. Surveys on death row inmates across the country tend to reveal similar grievances. Poor quality food that tastes terrible and may not meet basic nutritional requirements are typical problems faced by inmates. As stated, they're housed in the same conditions as all inmates who require maximum security. There are various levels of security controls used to maintain the safety of the public, staff, and inmates, depending on the unique challenges presented by each situation. The few death row inmates who have access to a window may wish they didn't, because these windows are frequently unscreened, allowing birds and insects into the cell. To top it all off, convicts in Texas can no longer request a special last meal before being executed. This special request is one of the few things death row inmates look forward to before their execution, and it may soon be taken away from them everywhere. The execution may go wrong. Even if a prisoner survives until execution day without becoming mentally deranged, seriously ill, or even killed by another inmate, they still face the genuine possibility that something else will go wrong. In an attempt to make the process more merciful and less painful, the use of lethal injection became the preferred method of execution. Unfortunately, things don't always go as planned. In Arizona, for example, Joseph Wood had to endure 15 injections over 2 hours before succumbing to his injuries. Death usually occurs in less than 10 minutes and only requires 1 injection, but during his 15 injections, Wood was said to have suffered a lot throughout the incident, according to witnesses. Conclusion. A death sentence is the highest legal punishment that anyone in the United States can be given. Regardless of how it's depicted in films and television shows, it is a harsh fate for those who have to go through it. A day in the life of a death row inmate is enough to scar one for life, and it isn't something anyone should look forward to. Let us know in the comments below what you think about death row inmates and capital punishment in general. If you'd like this video and want to see more like it, be sure to like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Also, click the bell icon to get notified whenever we post new videos. Thanks for watching.